the Christian worldview has the right perspective of people, that were fallen and were selfish. And so to get anything out of somebody, they got to benefit from it. So in the West, capitalism developed, and if I come up with a new idea, some better understanding of nature, and I can make a buck off of this, let's go with it. Mm-hmm. So that drive, harnessing selfish motives, is one aspect of benefit of the Christian worldview. So it's interesting to see all these factors. For example, established universities in the West, where academically the pursuit of what God's created could flourish, and when you look at surrounding cultures in the world, probably the most significant other one is Islamic cultures, where for a while you see math and optics develop, but you see it squelched as Muslim theology developed and concluded that anything other than the study of Allah is a waste of time. So you saw some early science interests sprout there, but it didn't develop because, well, the theology wasn't right. You weren't glorifying Allah by studying nature. You studied Allah himself. Yeah. So when you look at what happened in other cultures around the world, they didn't have all the factors necessary for science to flourish, but yet it did here.
So I think it's interesting if we go all the way back to the ancient Greeks and look at how they explored their world, because obviously there was a lot of advancements even in Greece, but the Greeks were at least Plato, the Platonists, were very much the ideal forms, and you could achieve all truth just through reasoning, right? So Plato actually was kind of reticent to say, you don't have to observe all this materialism stuff, and you can actually think hard about things, and you can come to ultimate truths. Aristotle, a little different, who didn't believe in the idea of form, so he says, no, you got to look at the world, you got to at least understand it. He didn't come up with a scientific methodology per se, but he does say that you have to examine these things. I think when the Muslims start their scientific advancements, it's after they conquer Constantinople. It's after they have access to Aristotle and some of his writings. And then within Christianity, what actually completes that and starts the Enlightenment period is a rediscovery, again, of Aristotle and some of these things. So Aristotle was a factor, I think, in this, but he was maybe a necessary element, but he wasn't a sufficient element in order to get the piece going. I think what you're saying is right, that the idea that there is a creator who creates in a logical order, that there will be laws of the universe. You think even you take that assumption and you look at Matthew Maury. Are you familiar with Matthew Maury, the father of oceanography, modern oceanography? He was a naval lieutenant that was bedridden, and someone was reading the Bible to him. He had known that there were currents, right? That there were resisting ships seemed to have harder times going in certain parts than others. But he heard in Psalm 8, that God said he puts them in the paths of the sea. And he goes, wait, there are paths in the sea. And that started his study on ocean currents. So it's that third piece that seems to come in. Because a lot of people will push back and say, well, the Chinese were inventing gunpowder and, this year.
But in China, it was for the entertainment of the emperor, or maybe warfare technology, that sort of a thing. But there wasn't this sense of, well, let's develop this so that we can help others
for the benefit
broadly
of the
than the emperor,
good.
right?
Yeah.
So there's these various factors that come into play. So.
Yeah, that period between the 1100s and up to you get to Aquinas' synthesis of Aristotle with the Christian revelation claim is interesting, with the Muslim philosophers rediscovering Aristotle first, and then Aquinas and Seeger of Brabant and others sort of trying to, disentangle certain their Islamic interpretation or their interpretations of Aristotle. And of course, Aquinas is successful, or we think he's fairly successful in his synthesis. But that was interesting because, as you said, John, after that period, there's a, and I don't know this particular history very well, but then there is a squelching of Islamic philosophy, which is maybe on route to some kind of scientific revolution. But there's sort of a Quran only movements, right, that impose themselves through from the top down, as Averroes and others are favoring philosophy, or natural philosophy, or over and against the Quranic revelation, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's an interesting period of study for sure. Yeah, and as Lay pointed out, for Aristotle is certainly to the objects themselves, where for Plato the sensible world was what we were trying to get away from, was the sensible world. It was ever in flux, and just images and shadows and so on and so forth.
Well, another thing with the
Yeah,
Greeks was the Greeks were kind of locked on ideal geometry. So, everything's got to be perfect spheres or perfect
right.
circles. And well, it doesn't quite fit the observations, but we'll go with the geometry rather than looking at perturbations in the observations as, well, wait, maybe we're not quite right. So there was that sort of math idealism that the Greeks had that didn't work in their favor either. So